Elena Holt stood in the hallway shadows, heart hammering, as her mother's voice drifted through the cracked door. Thank the heavens he asked for her. I thought we'd be stuck with that sharp-tongued creature forever. Laughter followed, her father's, her sister's, celebrating the marriage proposal like it was a miracle, but not the kind that saved someone, the kind that got rid of them. The powerful rancher Gideon Vale had shocked everyone by requesting Elena's hand instead of her prettier, softer sister's. And her own family? They were throwing a party because she was finally someone else's problem. Elena pressed her palm against the wall to steady herself, throat tight. She'd always known she wasn't loved, but hearing them cheer for her exile still split something open inside her chest. If you want to see how far a woman can rise when the people who were supposed to love her hope she falls, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Elena had stopped trying to be softer 3 years ago. It happened the morning after her youngest sister Marissa spilled tea on their father's account ledger, and Elena took the blame. She'd stood there, shoulders square, while he shouted himself red. Marissa, golden-haired and trembling, had watched from the corner with wide, grateful eyes. Their mother smoothed it over later with apologies and a fresh copy of the ruined page. But no one ever thanked Elena. Marissa never even looked at her the rest of that week. That was when Elena understood. It didn't matter what she did. The role was already cast. Marissa was delicate. Corinne was charming. Their mother was gracious. Their father was respected. And Elena? She was the problem. She stopped apologizing after that. Stopped rounding her edges. If they were going to call her difficult anyway, she might as well speak the truth. Now, standing outside the sitting room door, eavesdropping on her own family, Elena realized the truth had never mattered to them at all. Gideon Vale is a strange man, her father was saying, voice rich with satisfaction. But I'm not questioning Providence when it lands in my lap. She'll ruin it somehow. That was Corinne, eldest and engaged to a banker's son. You know how she is, blunt as a hammer. He'll send her back within a month. Let's hope he doesn't. Their mother's voice was light, almost cheerful. We've done our duty. If he's fool enough to want her, that's his concern now. More laughter. Elena's fingers curled into fists. The proposal had arrived 2 days earlier. A single letter, written in clear, unembellished script. Gideon Vale owned a sprawling ranch in the mountains north of town, a man known more by reputation than presence. Wealthy, powerful, uninterested in society. He'd met the Holt family exactly once, at a regional dinner 6 months prior. Elena barely remembered him, a tall, quiet man with dark eyes who hadn't said much and left early. But apparently he remembered her. The letter had been specific. He wasn't requesting a daughter. He was requesting Elena. Her father read it aloud at breakfast with a confusion that would have been funny if it wasn't so insulting. Corinne looked outraged. Marissa looked shocked. Their mother looked calculating. Well, she'd said slowly, folding her napkin. How unexpected. Elena said nothing. She was used to being the punchline. But now, listening through the door, she understood. This wasn't unexpected. This was an answer to a prayer they'd all been too polite to say out loud. Gideon Vale had given them an exit, and they were taking it. Elena turned and walked back down the hall, past the portraits of ancestors who all looked like Corinne and Marissa, past the sitting room where her mother hosted women who smiled with their teeth and judged with their eyes. She climbed the stairs to her small bedroom at the back of the house, the one with the window that stuck and the wallpaper no one bothered to replace. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at her hands. They were strong hands, scarred along the knuckles from the time she'd pulled a stranger's dog out of a frozen creek. Calloused from helping the stable hand when he threw his back out last winter and her father wouldn't pay for extra help. She'd spent 2 weeks mucking stalls and hauling feed, and the only thing anyone said about it was that it wasn't proper. Proper. She was so tired of that word. The next morning, her mother sat her down with tea and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. This is a tremendous opportunity, Elena. Elena sipped her tea, said nothing. Mr. Vale is a man of considerable means. You'll want for nothing, and his ranch is quite remote, so you'll have privacy. Translation: no one will have to see you embarrass us anymore. He sent word that he'll collect you himself in 3 days, her mother continued. We'll prepare your things. Does he know what he's getting? Elena asked. Her mother blinked. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Does he know I'm the daughter you've been trying to marry off since I was 16? That you've paraded me in front of every eligible man in town and they all walked away? Does he know you call me sharp-tongued behind my back?" Her mother's smile thinned. "You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. Yes, that's always been your problem." The words hung in the air like smoke. Her mother stood, smoothing her skirts. 3 days, Elena. Try to be gracious." Gracious. Another word that tasted like ash. The house was a flurry of activity over the next 2 days. Corinne and Marissa helped pack Elena's trunk with an enthusiasm that might have looked like sisterly love to an outsider. But Elena saw it for what it was. They were packing her up like old furniture headed for storage. "You'll write, won't you?" Marissa asked, folding one of Elena's plain dresses. "Why?" Elena asked. "So you can show people how much you care?" Marissa flushed. "That's cruel." "That's true," Corinne sighed. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" Elena looked at her. "No, I really can't." On the third day, Gideon Vale arrived. Elena watched from her bedroom window as he rode up the long drive on a dark horse, broad-shouldered and steady in the saddle. He dismounted with the ease of a man who spent more time outdoors than in, and her father met him at the door with a handshake and a smile so wide it could have split his face. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw her father clap Gideon on the shoulder like they were old friends. Saw her mother appear with refreshments. Saw Corinne and Marissa peek around the corner, curious. No one came to get her. She waited. Finally, a knock. The housekeeper looking uncomfortable. "Miss Elena, they're ready for you." Elena stood, smoothed her skirts, lifted her chin. She walked down the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. When she entered the sitting room, all eyes turned to her. Gideon Vale stood near the window. He was taller than she remembered. Older, too, maybe 35, though it was hard to say. His face was weathered, serious. Dark hair, dark eyes. He looked like a man who didn't waste time on things that didn't matter. He looked at her the way most people didn't, directly. "Miss Holt," he said. His voice was low, steady. Not warm, but not cold either. "Mr. Vale." Her father stepped forward, still smiling. "Well, I trust everything is in order." "It is." Gideon's gaze didn't leave Elena. "If Miss Holt is ready, we'll leave within the hour." Of course, her father gestured toward the door. "We'll give you a moment." And just like that, they all filed out. Her mother, her father, her sisters, leaving her alone with a man she didn't know, who'd asked for her hand for reasons she couldn't begin to guess. The door clicked shut. Gideon didn't move. Neither did she. "You don't have to do this," he said finally. Elena blinked. "Excuse me? If you don't want to come, you can refuse. I'll leave. No questions." She stared at him. "You rode all the way out here to tell me I can say no?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it should be your choice." Something in her chest twisted. She didn't know what to do with that. With him. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." "What does that mean?" He hesitated. Then, 6 months ago, at the dinner, there was a man outside the hall, drunk, making a scene. You stepped in. Elena remembered. An old ranch hand slurring and stumbling. Her father had been furious, calling for someone to remove him. But Elena had recognized him. He'd worked their stables years ago, before her father let him go without pay. She'd walked outside, steadied him, paid for a room at the inn with her own money. She didn't think anyone had noticed. "You didn't make a show of it," Gideon said. "You just did it. And when your father called you back inside, you didn't defend yourself. You just came." So I've spent 6 months thinking about that." He took a step closer. Not crowding, just present. "I don't need someone polished, Miss Holt. I need someone honest. Someone who doesn't perform kindness. Someone who does what's right, even when it costs them." Elena's throat felt tight. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I think I do. My own family can't stand me." "That says more about them than it does about you." She looked away. "You'll regret this." "Maybe." He didn't sound worried. "But I'd rather regret choosing someone real than spend my life with someone fake." The silence stretched. Outside, she could hear her mother's voice, faint and sweet, probably entertaining Gideon's driver. "I heard them." Elena said quietly. 2 nights ago. Talking about how glad they were you asked for me. How relieved they were to finally be rid of me. Gideon's jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. I don't know why you want this, she continued, but you should know. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. I'm not soft. I'm not sweet. I don't smile when I don't mean it, and I don't apologize for telling the truth. If that's going to be a problem, it's not. She met his eyes. He didn't flinch. Then I'll come, she said, but not because I'm grateful, and not because I think you're rescuing me. Why then? She smiled, thin and sharp. Because staying here would kill me slower. He nodded. That's reason enough. An hour later, Elena climbed into the wagon beside Gideon Vale, her trunk loaded in the back. Her family stood on the porch, waving, smiling, playing the part of the loving family sending off their daughter. Elena didn't wave back. As the wagon rolled down the drive, Gideon glanced at her. You all right? No, she said honestly, but I will be. He didn't argue, just flicked the reins and guided the horses north toward the mountains. They rode in silence for the first hour. The landscape shifted from manicured estates to open fields, then to rolling hills dotted with pine. The air grew sharper, cleaner. Elena watched the world change outside the wagon and felt something in her chest loosen, just a fraction. How far is it? She asked finally. 2 days? We'll stop tonight at a way station. Do you make this trip often? Not if I can help it. He glanced at her. I don't like towns much. Neither do I. Good. There's not one for 30 miles in any direction from the ranch. She almost smiled. Sounds perfect. They stopped as the sun dipped low at a small way station tucked between 2 hills. The woman who ran it, a sturdy, gray-haired widow named Mrs. Callahan, took one look at Elena and Gideon and raised an eyebrow. You two married? She asked bluntly. Not yet, Gideon said. Then she gets the room. You get the barn. Gideon didn't argue. He paid, unloaded Elena's small bag, and walked her to the door of a tiny, clean room with a bed and a wash basin. I'll be outside if you need anything, he said. I won't. He nodded, started to turn. Gideon? He stopped. Thank you, she said, for the choice. His expression softened, just barely. You're welcome, Elena. It was the first time he'd used her first name. It sounded different in his voice, less like a label, more like a person. She closed the door and sat on the bed, staring at the wall. For the first time in years, she let herself cry. Not because she was sad, but because for the first time in her life, someone had seen her, really seen her, and hadn't turned away. The next morning, they set out early. The terrain grew rougher, the road narrowing to a path that wound through dense forest. Gideon navigated it with ease, the reins loose in his hands. Tell me about the ranch, Elena said. It's big, mostly cattle, some horses. I've got a crew of 6 men year-round, more during the drive. Do they live on the property? Some. There's a bunkhouse. Main house is separate. And the house? He was quiet for a moment. It's not fancy, but it's sturdy. My father built it. I've kept it up. Your father's gone? 10 years now. Mother went a year later. I'm sorry. Don't be. They had a good life, worked hard, loved each other. That's more than most get. She studied his profile. Is that what you want? A good life? Yes? And you think I can give you that? He looked at her then, serious. I think we can build it together. The simplicity of it hit her harder than any flowery declaration ever could. He wasn't promising her the world. He was offering her a partnership, a chance to build something real. She wasn't sure she believed it yet, but she wanted to. By late afternoon on the second day, the mountains rose sharp and close around them. The path climbed, winding through rock and timber. And then, around a final bend, the valley opened up. Elena's breath caught. The ranch spread across the valley floor like something out of a painting, a sprawling house of dark wood and stone, smoke curling from the chimney. Fenced pastures dotted with cattle, a barn, a stable, a bunkhouse. And beyond it all, the mountains stood watch, snow-capped and eternal. This is it, Gideon said quietly. Elena didn't have words. As they rolled down into the valley, a few men emerged from the barn. Gideon raised a hand in greeting, and they nodded back. Curious glances slid toward Elena, but no one stared. Gideon pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. He climbed down, then offered her a hand. She took it. Her boots hit solid ground, and she looked up at the house. It was exactly like he'd said, sturdy, simple, real. No pretense, no performance. "Welcome home," Gideon said. Elena turned to him. For the first time since the proposal, she let herself hope. Just a little. "Let's see if it fits," she said. He smiled. Small, but real. "Let's." The house smelled like wood smoke and leather, and something Elena couldn't quite name. Maybe just the scent of a place that had been lived in by people who didn't worry about impressing anyone. Gideon pushed the door open and stepped aside, letting her enter first. The main room was large, open-beamed, with a stone fireplace that took up most of one wall. A worn sofa sat near it, a table and chairs by the window. Everything was clean but used, the kind of furniture that had stories in the scratches. No paintings on the walls, no decorative vases or lace curtains, just function, just life. "Kitchen's through there," Gideon said, nodding toward a doorway. "2 bedrooms upstairs. You'll take the larger one." Elena turned. "Where will you sleep?" "The smaller one." "We're not yet," he said evenly. "You'll have your own space until you decide otherwise." She didn't know what to say to that. In her world, marriage meant obligation, duty, a contract signed and executed without much thought to the people inside it. But Gideon kept handing her choices like they were normal, like she deserved them. "I'll bring your trunk up," he said, and disappeared back outside before she could argue. Elena stood in the center of the room, listening to the silence. It wasn't the heavy, judgmental silence of her father's house. It was just quiet, the kind that didn't demand anything from her. She walked to the window. Outside, the valley stretched wide and still, the mountains standing guard. A few of Gideon's men were working near the barn, their voices low and easy. One of them laughed, and the sound carried clear across the yard. Gideon came back in, trunk on his shoulder like it weighed nothing. He climbed the stairs without a word, and Elena followed. The bedroom he'd given her was twice the size of her old one. A wide bed with a quilt that looked handmade, a dresser, a chair by the window, simple but solid. The window faced east, and she could see the sunrise line already starting to glow faint behind the peaks. Gideon set the trunk down at the foot of the bed. "If you need anything, let me know." "I won't need anything." He looked at her for a long moment. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "Elena." He said her name like he was testing the weight of it. "You're allowed to need things. You're allowed to ask." She crossed her arms. "I've spent my whole life being told I ask for too much." Then they were wrong. He left before she could answer. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap. The quilt was soft under her fingers, worn smooth by time. She wondered who'd made it. Gideon's mother, maybe. A woman who'd loved a man enough to build a life in the middle of nowhere, who'd raised a son who didn't flinch from honesty. She unpacked slowly, placing her few dresses in the dresser, her brush on top. It didn't take long. She didn't own much. Most of what she'd brought were practical things: work dresses, sturdy boots, a coat for winter. Nothing fancy. Nothing she'd miss if it disappeared. When she came back downstairs, Gideon was at the stove, stirring something in a pot. He glanced over his shoulder. "You hungry? I can cook." "I know you can, but I'm already doing it." She hesitated, then sat at the table. Watched him move around the kitchen with the ease of someone who'd been doing it for years. He wasn't showy about it, just efficient. He ladled stew into 2 bowls, set one in front of her, and sat down across from her with the other. They ate in silence for a while. The stew was good, simple but hearty. Real food made by someone who understood that eating wasn't about performance. "The men will want to meet you tomorrow," Gideon said finally. "If you're up for it, why wouldn't I be? Some women don't like ranch hands much, think they're rough." Elena snorted. "I grew up around horses and stable workers. I've heard worse language at family dinners." He almost smiled. "Good. They're good men, but they're not polite." "Neither am I." "I know." This time he did smile, small and quick. "That's why I think you'll get along." The next morning, Elena woke to the sound of voices outside. She dressed quickly, pulling on one of her plain work dresses, and came downstairs to find Gideon already gone. Coffee sat on the stove, still hot. She poured herself a cup and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was just clearing the mountains, spilling gold across the valley. Gideon stood near the barn with 5 men, all of them listening as he talked. He gestured toward the far pasture, and one of the men nodded, said something Elena couldn't hear. Gideon clapped him on the shoulder, and the group split up, heading in different directions. Gideon turned and saw her, raised a hand. She walked over, coffee cup in hand. "Morning," he said. "Morning. Sleep all right?" "Better than I have in years." He nodded, like he'd expected that. "Come on, I'll introduce you." He led her to the barn where 2 men were hauling feed sacks. One was older, maybe 50, with a graying beard and a limp. The other was younger, broad-shouldered, with a scar across his cheek. "Elena, this is Samuel," Gideon said, nodding to the older man. "He's been here longer than I have, knows more about cattle than anyone I've met." Samuel tipped his hat. "Ma'am." "Elena's fine," she said. Samuel's eyebrows went up. He glanced at Gideon, who just shrugged. "And this is Rio," Gideon continued, gesturing to the younger man. "Best horse hand I've got." Rio grinned. "That's 'cause the horses like me better than they like him." "Horses like anyone better than they like me," Gideon said dryly. "I'm not charming." Elena laughed before she could stop herself. Both men looked at her, surprised, like they hadn't expected her to have a sense of humor. "You'll meet the others later," Gideon said. "They're out checking the fence line." "Need help?" Elena asked. All 3 men stared at her. "With what?" Samuel asked carefully. "Whatever needs doing." Rio's grin widened. "You serious?" "Do I look like I'm joking?" Gideon studied her. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm asking if I can." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Samuel, you need an extra pair of hands in the barn." Samuel scratched his beard. "Could use help sorting tack. Some of it needs mending." "I can do that," Elena said. "You know how to mend leather?" "I know how to sew. Can't be that different." Samuel looked at Gideon. Gideon looked at Elena. "You sure?" "Stop asking me that." Rio laughed outright. "I like her." Samuel sighed. "All right, come on then." Elena followed him into the barn, and Gideon watched her go with something like wonder on his face. The barn was dim and cool, smelling of hay and horses. Samuel led her to a workbench cluttered with bridles, reins, and saddle straps in varying states of disrepair. He handed her a piece of leather and a needle. "Start with that one," he said. "Strap split. Just needs a tight stitch to hold." Elena sat down and got to work. Her stitches weren't pretty, but they were strong. Samuel watched for a minute, then grunted approval and started on his own pile. They worked in silence for a while. It was comfortable, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. Outside, she could hear Rio calling to one of the horses, his voice easy and warm. "You really want to be here?" Samuel asked suddenly. Elena didn't look up. "Would I be sitting in a barn sewing leather if I didn't?" "Some women would, to make a good impression." "I'm not some women." Samuel chuckled. "No, I don't imagine you are." "Why do you ask?" He set down the bridle he was working on. "Gideon's a good man, best I've known. But he's been alone a long time. I just want to make sure he's not getting himself into something that's going to hurt him." Elena met his eyes. "I'm not here to hurt him." "Then why are you here?" She thought about that, about the house she'd left behind, the family that never wanted her, the years of biting her tongue and swallowing her anger. "Because he saw something in me that no one else did, and I want to know if he's right." Samuel nodded slowly. "Fair enough." They went back to work. By midday, Elena had mended 6 straps and 2 bridles. Her fingers were sore and there was a blister forming on her thumb, but she felt better than she had in months. Useful, needed, real. Gideon came to find her around noon, leaning in the barn doorway with his arms crossed. "You plan on working all day?" "Is that a problem?" "No, but you should eat." Samuel waved her off. "Go on. I've got the rest." Elena stood, brushing hay off her skirt. She followed Gideon back to the house, where he'd set out bread, cheese, and cold meat on the table. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I was making it anyway." They sat down, and Elena realized how hungry she was. She hadn't eaten like this in years, without someone watching, without someone commenting on her manners or her portions. She just ate, and it felt like freedom. Samuel says you're good with your hands, Gideon said. Samuel talks too much. He's protective. Of you? Of the ranch. Of the people on it. Gideon looked at her. He wants to make sure you're not here to cause trouble. And what do you think? I think trouble's not always a bad thing. Elena smiled despite herself. You might be the first person to ever say that to me. Then you've been around the wrong people. They finished eating, and Gideon stood. I've got to ride out to the north pasture, check on the herd. You want to come? Elena blinked. You're asking me to come with you? Unless you'd rather stay here. She thought about it. Thought about sitting in the house alone or going back to the barn, or any number of things she could do that would keep her busy and out of the way she'd always been. I'll come, she said. Gideon saddled 2 horses, a tall black gelding for himself and a smaller chestnut mare for Elena. The mare was calm, steady, and Elena swung up into the saddle with ease. Gideon raised an eyebrow. You ride. I told you, I grew up around horses. You didn't tell me you were good at it. You didn't ask. They rode out together, following a narrow trail that wound up into the hills. The air was sharp and clean, and the sky stretched wide and blue overhead. Elena felt something in her chest loosen even further, like a knot she'd been carrying for years was finally starting to unravel. How long have you had the ranch? She asked. My whole life. My father started it when I was a boy, built it from nothing, and you've kept it going. I've tried. You've done more than try. She looked around at the land, the careful fences, the healthy cattle grazing in the distance. This doesn't happen by accident. Gideon was quiet for a moment. My father used to say the land will give you everything you need if you're willing to work for it, and if you're willing to let it teach you. What's it taught you? That nothing worth having comes easy. That you can't control everything, but you can control how you show up. And that the people who matter are the ones who stay when things get hard. Elena thought about her family, who'd pushed her out the door the second someone offered to take her. Not everyone believes that. No, Gideon agreed. Not everyone does. They reached the north pasture, a wide stretch of grassland dotted with cattle. Gideon dismounted and walked the fence line, checking for breaks. Elena stayed on her horse, watching the way he moved, methodical, careful, like every small thing mattered. You do this every day? She asked. Most days. Can't let things slide. A small problem becomes a big one fast out here. Sounds exhausting. He glanced at her. It is. But it's honest work. I'd rather be tired from something real than rested from something fake. Elena couldn't argue with that. They rode back as the sun started to dip, painting the mountains in shades of orange and pink. When they reached the barn, Rio was waiting, holding the reins of a skittish horse. Boss, he called. Got a problem. Gideon dismounted quickly. What happened? This one threw a shoe. Cut her hoof pretty bad. I cleaned it, but she needs wrapping. Gideon moved to the horse's side, running a hand down her leg. The mare flinched, and he murmured something low and soothing. Get me the wrap and the salve. Rio jogged into the barn. Gideon knelt, examining the hoof carefully. The horse shifted, nervous, and Elena dismounted, walking over slowly. Easy, she said softly, placing a hand on the mare's neck. You're all right. The horse's ears flicked toward her. Elena kept her voice low, steady, stroking the mare's shoulder. Gideon glanced up, surprised, but didn't say anything. He just kept working, wrapping the hoof with quick, practiced hands. There, he said finally, standing. That should hold until we can get the farrier out. The mare nuzzled Elena's hand, calmer now. Rio came back with a grin. She likes you. Horses usually do, Elena said. Maybe you should be the one training them, Rio said. Maybe I should. Gideon looked between them, something unreadable in his expression. Then he nodded. If you want to help with the horses, you're welcome to. Elena met his eyes. I'd like that. That night, over dinner, Gideon told her about the ranch's history, about his father clearing the land, building the house with his own hands, about his mother, who'd been a teacher before she married, and who'd taught Gideon to read by lamplight, about the hard winters and the summer droughts, the years they almost lost everything and the years they thrived. It sounds like they loved each other, Elena said. They did. My father used to say she was the smartest person he ever met, and my mother said he was the kindest. Do you believe in that? That kind of love? Gideon set down his fork. I believe it's possible. I've seen it, but I also think it takes work. It's not just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day. Elena thought about that, about the marriages she'd seen, her parents, her sister Corinne, and her banker fiancé. All the society couples who smiled in public and lived separate lives in private. I don't think I've ever seen a marriage that looked like work, just performance. Then you've been looking at the wrong marriages. She met his eyes. What are you looking for, Gideon? Really? He didn't hesitate. A partner. Someone who'll stand with me when things get hard. Someone I can trust. Someone who doesn't need me to be anything other than what I am. And you think I'm that person? I think you could be, if you want to be. The honesty of it hit her square in the chest. No games, no pretense, just truth. I don't know if I know how to do that, she admitted. I've spent so long just trying to survive my own family. I don't know what it looks like to actually build something with someone. Neither do I, Gideon said, but I'm willing to try, if you are. Elena looked at him. This man who'd chosen her when no one else had, who'd given her space and choices and a place to breathe, who looked at her like she was a person, not a problem. I'm willing, she said quietly. Gideon nodded, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Elena felt like maybe this could work. Maybe this strange, unexpected arrangement could become something real. The days began to settle into a rhythm. Elena woke early, made coffee, and joined Gideon and the men for breakfast. She worked in the barn with Samuel, mending tack and learning the names of all the horses. She rode out with Gideon to check the fences and the herds, asking questions he answered without condescension. She helped Rio train a young colt, her hands steady and her voice calm. The men stopped looking at her like she was a curiosity. They started looking at her like she belonged. One afternoon, about 2 weeks in, Elena was in the barn brushing down the chestnut mare when she heard voices outside. Sharp voices. Angry. She stepped out to find Gideon standing toe-to-toe with a man she didn't recognize, older, red-faced, dressed in clothes too fine for ranch work. You can't just refuse, the man was saying, voice tight with fury. We had an agreement. We had a conversation, Gideon said evenly. I never agreed to anything. You led me to believe I told you I'd think about it. I did. The answer's no. The man's face went redder. You're making a mistake, Vale. You need allies in this county, people who can help you when things go wrong. I've gotten along fine without your kind of help. Your kind of help? The man laughed, bitter. You mean honest business? Or are you too high and mighty for that now? I mean, the kind of business that involves squeezing smaller ranchers until they sell for nothing. I'm not interested. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. Elena couldn't hear what he said, but she saw Gideon's jaw tighten. Get off my land, Gideon said quietly. You'll regret this. I'll take my chances. The man turned and his eyes landed on Elena. He looked her up and down, something ugly crossing his face. So this is the new wife, Holt's cast-off daughter. I heard about that. Elena's spine went stiff. Careful, Gideon said, voice dropping to something dangerous. But the man ignored him, smirking at Elena. Your father must have been thrilled to finally get rid of you. I heard you were quite the burden. Elena walked forward, stopping a few feet from him. You heard right. I was a burden. Because I didn't smile and nod when men like you said things that deserved pushback. Because I didn't pretend to be stupid so you could feel smart. So yes, I was a burden. And I'm fine with that. The man's smirk faltered. Now get off this land, Elena said, voice steady and cold, before I make you. The man looked at Gideon like he expected him to rein her in, but Gideon just crossed his arms and waited. The man spat into the dirt and stalked back to his horse. He rode off without another word. Elena watched him go, heart hammering. When she turned, Gideon was staring at her. What? She asked. Nothing. But there was something in his eyes, pride maybe, or respect. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He stepped closer. Elena, that man's name is Carter Webb. He owns half the county. He's got connections, money, and a mean streak a mile wide. Good. Then he'll remember not to come back. Gideon shook his head, but he was almost smiling. You're going to get me killed." "You're welcome." That night, sitting by the fire, Gideon told her what Webb had wanted. A partnership, he called it. But really it was a takeover. Webb wanted access to Gideon's land, his water rights, his cattle routes. In exchange, he'd offer protection and connections. "It's extortion," Elena said. "More or less." "And you said no." "I've been saying no for 2 years. He keeps coming back." "He'll keep coming back until you make it hurt to do so." Gideon looked at her. "What do you mean? Men like that don't stop because you're polite. They stop when you make it clear there's a cost." She leaned forward. "What does he need from you that he can't get anywhere else?" Gideon thought for a moment. "Water. The river runs through my land. His cattle need it during the dry season. Then cut him off. That'll make him angry. He's already angry. At least this way he'll know you're serious." Gideon stared into the fire. "You sound like my father. Was he smart?" "Very. Then maybe listen." He laughed, low and surprised. "You know, most people try to talk me out of fights. You're the first person who's ever told me to pick one. Most people are worried about making enemies. I'm worried about letting bullies win." Gideon looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded. "All right. We'll do it your way." "Our way," she corrected. He smiled. "Our way." The next week, Gideon had Samuel and 2 of the other men reroute part of the river access, cutting off the section that ran closest to Webb's land. It was legal, the water was on Gideon's property, but it was a clear message. Webb showed up 3 days later, angrier than before. But this time, Elena stood beside Gideon on the porch, arms crossed, and didn't budge. "You're making a mistake," Webb said again. "You keep saying that," Gideon replied. "But I'm still standing." Webb glared at Elena. "This her idea?" "Does it matter?" Gideon asked. Webb looked between them, jaw working. Then he spat again and rode off. This time, he didn't come back. That night, lying in bed, Elena stared at the ceiling and let herself feel it. The strange, tentative thing growing between her and Gideon. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something. Trust, maybe. Partnership. She thought about the life she'd left behind. The house where she was never enough. The family who couldn't wait to be rid of her. And then she thought about this place. The rough-edged men who'd started greeting her by name, the horses who nuzzled her hands, the land that stretched wide and wild under the sky. And Gideon, who saw her, who didn't flinch. For the first time in her life, Elena Holt felt like she might actually be home. The morning Elena realized she was happy, she was knee-deep in mud trying to free a calf that had wandered into the creek bed and gotten stuck. "Pull!" Rio shouted from the other side, rope in hand. Elena braced her boots against the slick bank and hauled on the calf's hindquarters, while Gideon worked to loop the rope under its belly. The animal bawled, panicked, and thrashing, and Elena nearly lost her footing twice before they finally dragged it free onto solid ground. The calf scrambled up, shook itself off, and trotted back toward its mother like nothing had happened. Elena sat down hard in the mud, breathing heavy, and started laughing. Rio stared at her. "You all right?" "I'm covered in mud and cow shit," she said, still laughing, "and I've never been better." Gideon reached down and pulled her to her feet. His hands were just as filthy as hers. "You're losing your mind." "Maybe," she grinned at him, "but if this is crazy, I'll take it." He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he smiled back, small and real. "Come on, let's get cleaned up." They walked back to the house together, boots squelching, and Elena caught herself stealing glances at him. At the way he moved, easy and sure. At the line of his jaw, the set of his shoulders. At the way he didn't seem to mind that she was a mess. She'd been at the ranch for 6 weeks now. 6 weeks of waking up to mountains and coffee. Of working alongside people who didn't expect her to be anything other than useful. 6 weeks of Gideon treating her like a person who mattered. And somewhere in all of that, something had shifted. She wasn't sure when it happened. Maybe it was the night he'd taught her to play cards, and she'd beaten him 3 hands in a row, and instead of being annoyed, he'd laughed so hard he had to wipe his eyes. Maybe it was the morning she'd found him asleep at the kitchen table, account book spread out in front of him, and she'd covered him with a blanket without waking him. Maybe it was the 100 small moments in between. The way he always poured her coffee first, the way he asked her opinion and actually listened, the way he looked at her like she was someone worth seeing. She didn't know when it happened, but she knew it had. That night, after dinner, they sat on the porch watching the sun drop behind the mountains. The air was cooling, carrying the scent of pine and grass. Gideon had his boots propped on the railing, a cup of coffee in his hands. "You ever think about going back?" he asked. Elena didn't have to ask what he meant. "No. Not even to visit?" "Why would I?" He glanced at her. "They're still your family. Family's supposed to mean something. They were just people I lived with who happened to share my blood." She pulled her knees up to her chest. "I don't miss them. I don't even think about them most days." "And when you do?" "I remember why I left." Gideon was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you did." She looked at him, heart doing something complicated in her chest. "Yeah? Yeah." He met her eyes. "I know this wasn't what you expected. I know it's hard work and long days and not much else. But I'm glad you're here, Elena. This place is better with you in it." She swallowed. "You're better with me in it, or the ranch is better?" "Both." The word hung between them, honest and unguarded. Elena felt something crack open inside her, something she'd kept locked down for years because letting it out had always ended badly. But sitting here, with Gideon looking at her like that, she thought maybe it didn't have to. "I'm glad I'm here too," she said quietly. His mouth curved, just barely. "Good." They sat in silence after that, but it wasn't empty. It was full of all the things neither of them knew how to say yet. The next day, Samuel came to find Elena in the barn. She was brushing down the chestnut mare, humming something under her breath. "Got a question for you," Samuel said, leaning against the stall door. "Go ahead." "Gideon's birthday's next week. We usually do something small, cook a big meal, break out the whiskey. You interested in helping?" Elena paused mid-brush. "He didn't tell me." "He wouldn't. Man doesn't like a fuss." "Then why make one?" Samuel smiled. "Because some people deserve a fuss whether they like it or not." Elena thought about that. About the years she'd spent in a house where birthdays were performances, elaborate parties thrown to impress people who didn't care. She'd hated every one of them. But this, a simple meal, people who actually cared, that was different. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Samuel's smile widened. "That's what I thought you'd say." They spent the next week planning in secret. Samuel taught Elena how to make Gideon's mother's biscuit recipe, written in faded ink on a scrap of paper he'd kept for years. Rio snuck into town and came back with a bottle of good whiskey and a new leather belt to replace the one Gideon had worn nearly to pieces. The other men pitched in too. Someone fixed the wobbly chair Gideon always sat in. Someone else patched the leak in the barn roof he'd been meaning to get to for months. Elena made the biscuits 3 times before she got them right. The first batch burned. The second was too dense. The third came out golden and perfect, and when she pulled them from the oven, Samuel nodded approval. "His mama would have liked you," he said. "You think?" "I know. She didn't suffer fools either." On the morning of Gideon's birthday, Elena woke him before dawn. He blinked at her, confused and still half asleep. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing. Get up." "Elena, I made coffee. Come downstairs." He followed her down, rubbing his eyes, and stopped short when he saw the table. Biscuits, bacon, eggs, fresh jam, more food than they usually ate in a week. "What is this?" he asked. "Breakfast." "It's too much. It's your birthday, and you're going to sit down and eat it." He stared at her. "How did you—" "Samuel told me. Sit." He sat, looking overwhelmed and uncomfortable in the best way. Elena poured him coffee and sat down across from him, and they ate together in the quiet morning light. "You didn't have to do this," Gideon said finally. "I know. But you did anyway. Apparently I like you or something." He smiled into his coffee cup. "Apparently." That evening, the men gathered in the main room. Someone had brought a fiddle, and someone else had brought a harmonica, and the music was rough and inexpert but real. They passed the whiskey bottle around, told stories that got louder and less believable as the night went on. Samuel told the one about the time Gideon's horse threw him into a trough, and Rio countered with the one about Samuel getting chased by a bull he'd insulted. Elena sat on the floor near the fireplace, watching them all, watching Gideon laugh, his face open and easy in a way she'd never seen before. He caught her eye across the room and smiled, and she felt it again, that crack in her chest widening. Later, when the others had stumbled off to the bunkhouse and the house was quiet again, Gideon walked Elena upstairs. They stopped outside her door and he leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets. "Thank you," he said, "for today, for all of it." "You're welcome." "I mean it, Elena. I haven't had a birthday like that since my parents were alive." She looked down at her hands. "You deserve people who care about you." "So do you." She met his eyes. He was standing close enough that she could see the firelight still reflected in his gaze. Close enough that if she leaned forward just a little— "Gideon," she said quietly. "Yeah? I think I'm falling for you." The words came out before she could stop them, raw and honest and terrifying. She waited for him to pull back, to laugh, to tell her she was confused or mistaken. But he didn't. Instead, he reached out and cupped her face in his hand, thumb brushing her cheek. "I've been falling for you since the day you told Carter Webb to get off my land. That was only a few weeks ago." "I know. I'm a slow learner." He smiled, soft and a little crooked. "But I'm catching up." She kissed him. She didn't plan it, didn't think about it. She just closed the distance between them and pressed her mouth to his, and he kissed her back like he'd been waiting for it. His hand slid into her hair, and hers gripped the front of his shirt, and for a moment the whole world narrowed down to just this, his mouth on hers, his heart beating against her palm. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "I should—" Gideon started. "Stay," Elena said. "Or don't. But don't leave, because you think you're supposed to." He searched her face. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He kissed her again, softer this time, and then took her hand and led her into the room. They didn't rush. There was no performance, no pretense, just two people who'd spent their whole lives feeling like they didn't fit, finally finding someone who made sense. Gideon was careful with her, asking without words if each touch was all right, and Elena answered with her hands, her mouth, the way she pulled him closer. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the dark, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Do what?" "This. Be with someone, trust someone." She traced a pattern on his skin. "I've spent so long keeping people out. I'm not sure I remember how to let them in." "Then we'll figure it out together." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I don't have all the answers either, Elena, but I know I want this. I want you, and I'm willing to do the work if you are." "I am," she whispered. "Then that's enough." She closed her eyes and let herself believe it. The next few weeks felt like a dream. They fell into a new rhythm, one that included stolen kisses in the barn and hands brushing under the table at meals. The men noticed, of course. It was impossible not to, but no one said anything. They just smiled and looked the other way. Elena started sleeping in Gideon's room. Not every night, but most. She liked waking up next to him, liked the way he looked at her first thing in the morning like she was the best part of his day. She liked the conversations they had in the dark, the way he told her things he'd never told anyone else. He told her about the year his mother died, how he'd wanted to sell the ranch and leave because everything reminded him of her. But Samuel had sat him down and told him that running wouldn't bring her back, and staying wouldn't keep her gone. That the ranch was a living thing, and it needed him whether he was grieving or not. "He was right," Gideon said. "The work saved me. Gave me something to focus on when everything else felt impossible." "Is that why you work so hard?" Elena asked. "Because it keeps you from feeling too much?" He was quiet for a long time. "Maybe. At first. But now it's just who I am. You're allowed to rest, you know." "I know." He tightened his arm around her. "It's easier when you're here." She told him about the years she'd spent trying to be what her family wanted. How she'd practiced smiling in the mirror, practiced softening her voice, practiced being someone she wasn't, and how it never worked because they didn't want her to be better. They wanted her to be different. "I thought there was something wrong with me," she said. "I thought if I could just figure out the right way to be, they'd love me." "There's nothing wrong with you." "I know that now." She looked up at him. "But it took leaving them to figure it out." "Then I'm glad you left." One afternoon, Gideon asked her to ride out with him to the far pasture. They packed a lunch and set off, following the trail that wound up into the high country. The view from the top was breathtaking, miles of open land, The valley spread out below, the mountains rising on all sides. They ate in the shade of an old pine, and Gideon pulled something from his saddlebag, a small wooden box worn smooth with age. "What's that?" Elena asked. "Open it." She did. Inside was a ring, simple, silver, with a small blue stone set in the center. Her breath caught. "It was my mother's," Gideon said. "My father gave it to her the day he asked her to marry him. She wore it every day until she died." Elena stared at the ring, heart pounding. "I know we've only been together a short time," Gideon continued, "and I know this wasn't a normal courtship, but I also know that I don't want to spend another day pretending this is temporary. I don't want to keep calling you my fiancée when what I mean is my wife." He took the ring from the box and held it out. "Marry me, Elena. Not because of some arrangement our fathers made, not because you didn't have anywhere else to go, but because you want to. Because this is what you choose." Tears blurred her vision. "You're really asking me?" "I'm really asking." She thought about the girl she'd been 6 weeks ago, sitting in her father's house, overhearing her family celebrate her exile. She thought about the woman she was now, covered in mud and calluses, standing on a mountain with a man who saw her and didn't flinch. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit like it had been made for her. Then he kissed her, soft and sure, and Elena felt the last piece of her broken heart click into place. They rode back to the ranch as the sun started to set, and when they told the men, Rio let out a whoop that probably echoed across the valley. Samuel shook Gideon's hand, then pulled Elena into a gruff hug. "About time," he muttered. That night, lying in bed, Elena turned the ring on her finger, watching the firelight catch the stone. "You nervous?" Gideon asked. "No." She looked at him. "Are you?" Terrified. She laughed. "Why?" "Because I've never wanted something this much, and I keep waiting for it to fall apart." She rolled onto her side, facing him. "It's not going to fall apart." "How do you know?" "Because we're not your parents, and we're not mine. We're us, and we get to decide how this goes." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I love you." It was the first time he'd said it out loud. Elena's throat tightened. "I love you too," she whispered. They decided to marry quickly. There was no point in waiting, no reason to drag it out. Gideon wanted it simple, just them, the men, and maybe a few neighbors who'd been kind over the years. No big ceremony, no spectacle. Elena agreed immediately. She'd seen enough performative weddings to last a lifetime. They chose a Saturday morning 2 weeks out. Samuel offered to ride into town and fetch the minister, a quiet man named Reverend Holt. No relation to Elena's family, thank goodness, who'd known Gideon's parents. Elena didn't have a wedding dress, and she didn't want one. She wore her best dress, a simple gray thing with tiny buttons down the front, and pinned her hair back with a comb Gideon's mother had left behind. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a bride. She just saw herself, and that felt right. The ceremony took place outside, near the big pine tree that overlooked the valley. The men stood in a loose circle, hats in hand, and Reverend Holt read from a small worn book. Gideon held Elena's hands and spoke his vows in a voice that didn't waver. "I promise to stand with you," he said, "to work beside you, to listen when you speak and trust your judgment. I promise to be honest, even when it's hard. And I promise to love you, not because you're easy, but because you're real." Elena's voice shook a little when it was her turn, but she meant every word. "I promise to be your partner," she said, "to pull my weight, and then some. To tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. I promise to stay, even when things get hard. And I promise to love you, not because you saved me, but because you saw me." Reverend Holt smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Gideon kissed her, and the men cheered, and Elena felt lighter than she had in her entire life. They celebrated with a meal that lasted hours. Someone roasted a pig, someone else made cornbread, and there was more whiskey than was strictly necessary. The fiddle came out again, and Rio tried to teach Elena a dance she didn't know, and she stepped on his feet 3 times before giving up and laughing so hard she had to sit down. Gideon pulled her onto his lap, and she leaned back against his chest, his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Ridiculously." "Good." He kissed her temple. "You deserve it." As the night wore on and the men drifted off one by one, Elena and Gideon stayed by the fire. She turned the ring on her finger again, still getting used to the weight of it. "Do you think they know?" she asked. "Who?" "My family. Do you think they know I'm married?" Gideon considered. "Does it matter?" She thought about it, about her father's dismissive voice, her mother's cold smile, her sister's relief when she left, and she realized it didn't. They'd had their chance to know her, to love her, to see her as more than a problem. They'd chosen not to. "No," she said. "It doesn't matter at all." Gideon tightened his arms around her. "Then forget them." And she did. The weeks that followed were some of the best of Elena's life. She and Gideon worked the ranch together, side by side, building something bigger than either of them. She learned to read the weather, to spot a sick cow before it got worse, to fix a fence post in under 10 minutes. Gideon learned to let her carry her share, to trust her instincts, to lean on her when things got overwhelming. They fought sometimes, sharp, quick arguments about whose idea was better, or whether they should sell part of the herd, or how to handle a problem with one of the men. But they fought fair, and they always came back to each other. One night, after a particularly heated argument about whether to expand the north pasture, Elena stormed out to the barn to cool off. Gideon found her an hour later, sitting on a hay bale, arms crossed. "You're being stubborn," he said. "So are you." "I know." He sat down next to her. "But I also know you're right." She blinked. "What?" "About the pasture. We should expand. I don't like spending money we don't have to spend." "We have it," she said. "I saw the books." "I know, but what if something goes wrong?" "Then we deal with it, together." He looked at her, and something in his face softened. "I'm not used to this. Having someone to share the weight with. Get used to it." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're stuck with me now." He kissed the top of her head. "Best decision I ever made." The seasons shifted. Summer faded into fall, the air turning crisp and the leaves burning gold and red. They worked harder as winter approached, preparing the ranch for the cold months ahead. Elena learned to can vegetables, to smoke meat, to patch the drafts in the windows with old cloth. Gideon taught her to shoot, and she turned out to be a better shot than he was, which both annoyed and impressed him. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked, after she hit 3 targets in a row. "I didn't. I'm just better at it than you." He shook his head, but he was smiling. By the time the first snow fell, Elena felt like she'd lived at the ranch her whole life. Like the girl who'd grown up in her father's house was someone else entirely. She barely recognized that person anymore, the one who'd swallowed her anger and tried to be small, the one who'd believed she was the problem. She wasn't that girl anymore. She was Elena Vale. Wife to a good man, partner in a life that demanded everything and gave back more. Woman who'd chosen herself and been chosen in return, and she'd never been happier. The first heavy snow came in late November, blanketing the valley in white so thick Elena couldn't see the barn from the house. She stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching the world disappear. Gideon came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "Terrifying," she said. "How do you get anything done when you can't see 10 feet in front of you?" Carefully, he kissed her neck. "And sometimes you just wait it out." They spent 3 days snowed in, just the two of them. The men were safe in the bunkhouse with enough supplies to last a week, and the animals were sheltered. There was nothing to do but sit by the fire, read old books, and talk about everything and nothing. Elena discovered she liked being trapped with Gideon, liked the way they didn't need to fill every silence, liked how he'd look up from his book and smile at her for no reason, liked the way they fit together on the sofa, her feet in his lap, his hand absently rubbing her ankle. On the third night, as the wind howled outside, Gideon asked her something he'd never asked before. "Do you ever think about having children?" Elena set down her book. "Sometimes." "Do you?" "I used to think I didn't want them. The ranch is hard enough without adding more responsibility." He paused. "But lately I've been thinking it might be nice. Someone to leave all this to. Someone to teach things to. Someone to ruin with our combined stubbornness," Elena said. He laughed. "That too." She thought about it. About a child running through these halls, learning to ride, helping with the chores. A little person who'd grow up knowing they were wanted, knowing their voice mattered, everything she'd never had. I think I'd like that, she said quietly. Someday. No rush? No rush, she agreed, but something had shifted between them. A door opening to a future they hadn't quite imagined yet. When the snow finally cleared, they dug themselves out and got back to work. The cold was brutal, the kind that made your fingers go numb, even through gloves. But Elena didn't complain. She just worked harder, proving to herself as much as anyone that she could handle it. One morning in mid-December, Samuel came to the house looking grim. "We got a problem," he said. Gideon was on his feet immediately. "What kind?" "Found 3 head dead in the north pasture. Looks like they got sick and we didn't catch it in time." "Sick how?" "Don't know, but we need to check the rest of the herd. If it's spreading, I'll get my coat," Gideon said. Elena was already pulling on her boots. "I'm coming." They spent the next 2 days going through every animal, checking for signs of illness. It was exhausting, freezing work. They found 2 more sick cows and separated them immediately, but the rest seemed fine. "Could have been worse," Samuel said as they finished the last count. "Could have been better," Gideon replied. He looked worn down, the weight of it showing in his shoulders. That night, Elena found him at the kitchen table staring at the account books. She sat down across from him. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Not terrible, but losing 5 head in 1 week isn't great, especially right before winter. We'll make it up in the spring." "Maybe," he rubbed his face. "I just hate losing animals. Feels like I failed them somehow." "You didn't fail anyone. Sometimes things just go wrong." "I know. Doesn't make it easier." She reached across the table and took his hand. "You don't have to carry this alone." He squeezed her fingers. "I'm still getting used to that." "Then keep practicing." He smiled, tired but real. "Yes, ma'am. Yes." Christmas came quiet and small. They didn't have much in the way of decorations, but Elena cut pine branches and strung them over the mantel, and Gideon brought in a small tree that they decorated with strings of popcorn and whatever ribbon they could find. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like home. On Christmas morning, Gideon gave her a new pair of riding gloves, lined with soft wool. "Your hands were freezing last week," he said. She gave him a new knife for his belt, the handle carved with his initials. "Your old one's falling apart." They exchanged gifts like they did everything else. Practical, thoughtful, real. The men came over for dinner, and they cooked a feast. Turkey, potatoes, Samuel's biscuits, and a pie. Elena had attempted that came out lopsided, but tasted fine. They ate until they couldn't move, told stories until their voices were hoarse, and for one night the ranch felt less like work and more like family. After everyone left, Elena and Gideon lay in bed, pleasantly exhausted. "Best Christmas I've had in years," he said. "Me too." She turned to look at him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For this. All of it. For making me feel like I belong somewhere." He pulled her close. "You do belong. Right here." Winter dragged on, brutal and unforgiving. They lost another cow to the cold, and one of the horses went lame and had to be put down. The work was relentless, breaking ice on the water troughs, hauling feed through snow, checking on animals in weather that made your lungs burn. But Elena had never felt more alive. She learned things about herself she'd never known, that she was stronger than she thought, that she could go days on too little sleep and still keep moving, that she could make decisions under pressure and trust herself to be right. And she learned things about Gideon too, that he pushed himself too hard and needed someone to tell him to rest, that he worried more than he let on, that he loved this land with a fierceness that was almost painful to watch. One night in late January, Elena woke to find his side of the bed empty. She pulled on a shawl and went downstairs. He was sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just thinking." She sat down next to him. "About what?" "About how lucky I am." He looked at her. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for you to realize you made a mistake coming here." "I didn't make a mistake." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." She took his hand. "Gideon, I'm not going anywhere. I chose this. I chose you. And I keep choosing you every single day. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard." He kissed her then, deep and grateful, and she kissed him back like she was proving something. Maybe she was. By February, the worst of the winter had passed. The days were still cold, but the snow came less often, and there were hints of spring in the air. The men started talking about the work ahead, calving season, repairs, getting ready for the drive. Elena threw herself into preparations. She helped Rio inventory the tack, mended what could be saved, and made lists of what needed replacing. She worked with Samuel to plan the garden they'd plant in a few months. She even convinced Gideon to let her help with the books, organizing the accounts in a way that made more sense than his father's old system. "You're good at this," he said, watching her work. "I'm good at a lot of things. You're just now figuring that out?" He grinned. "I'm a slow learner. We established this." One afternoon, a rider came up the valley road. Elena saw him from the barn and called for Gideon. They met the man in the yard, a young courier with a letter in his hand. "Delivery for Mrs. Elena Vale," he said. Elena's stomach dropped. She took the letter, hands suddenly unsteady. The handwriting on the envelope was her father's. Gideon paid the courier, who tipped his hat and rode off. Then Gideon turned to Elena. "You want to open it alone?" "No?" She broke the seal and unfolded the paper. The letter was short, cold. "Elena, your sister Corinne's engagement has been called off. The banker's family discovered certain financial irregularities in our accounts and withdrew their offer. Marissa's prospects have similarly diminished. Your mother and I find ourselves in a difficult position. We believe it would be beneficial if you could speak to your husband about extending a business arrangement. Mr. Vale's reputation carries weight in this county. A word from him could restore our standing. We expect to hear from you promptly." Your father Elena read it twice, then handed it to Gideon. He read it, his jaw tightening with every line. "Unbelievable," he said finally. "Not really." Elena's voice was flat. "This is exactly who they are. They haven't spoken to you in months, didn't even acknowledge our marriage, and now they want help? They want your name, your influence. They don't care about me any more now than they did then." She took the letter back and stared at it. "Financial irregularities. That's a nice way of saying my father's been cheating people." "Are you surprised?" "No." She crumpled the letter in her fist. "But I'm angry." "What do you want to do?" She looked at him. "What would you do? It's not my decision." "I'm asking anyway." Gideon was quiet for a moment. "I'd tell them no. I'd tell them they made their choice when they threw you out, and they don't get to come back now that it's convenient. But that's me. You might feel differently." "I don't." She threw the letter into the fire pit. "I don't feel differently at all." She didn't write back, didn't send word, just let the silence stretch. 2 weeks later, another letter came. This one was longer, more desperate. Her father claimed they were on the verge of losing the house. That Corinne was devastated. That surely Elena could find it in her heart to help her own family. Elena burned that one too. A third letter arrived a week after that. This one wasn't from her father, it was from her mother, written in her careful, elegant script. "Dearest Elena, I understand you may harbor some resentment toward us. Perhaps we were not as understanding as we could have been during your time at home. But surely you can see past old grievances to help your family in our time of need. Your father is a proud man. It is difficult for him to ask for help. But we are desperate, Elena. If you have any love left for us, any sense of duty, you will speak to your husband on our behalf. Your loving mother." Elena read it standing by the fire. When she finished, she looked at Gideon. "She thinks I owe them," she said. "After everything, she actually thinks I owe them." "Do you?" "No." The word came out hard and sure. "I don't owe them anything." "Then you have your answer." But saying it and believing it were different things. Elena found herself thinking about the letter all day. About Corinne, who'd looked at her like she was embarrassing. About Marissa, who'd never once stood up for her. About her mother's careful lies and her father's dismissive cruelty. She thought about the girl she'd been, trying so hard to earn scraps of affection. And she thought about the woman she was now, standing in a valley she'd helped build, married to a man who saw her as an equal. That night, she sat down and wrote a response. Short, clear. "Mother, I received your letter. I will not be speaking to my husband on your behalf. You had years to show me love, to treat me with respect, to see me as more than a burden. You chose not to. That was your decision. This is mine. I hope you find a way out of your difficulties. But you will not find it through me. Elena Vale. She sealed it, addressed it, and gave it to the courier the next morning. When he rode off, she felt something lift from her shoulders, something she'd been carrying for too long. Gideon found her later, standing on the porch, staring out at the mountains. "You all right?" he asked. "Better than all right." She turned to him. "I think I'm finally free." He smiled and pulled her close. "Good. You deserve that." Spring came slowly, then all at once. The snow melted, the grass turned green, and the world woke up. Calving season hit hard and fast, and suddenly there were new lives to tend, new problems to solve. Elena worked alongside the men, helping with difficult births, bottle feeding the calves whose mothers couldn't nurse, staying up all night when it was needed. She was exhausted, covered in mud and worse, and she'd never been happier. One morning, she and Gideon were checking on a newborn calf when Rio came running. "Boss, rider coming up fast." They exchanged a look and headed for the yard. A single horse was galloping up the road, kicking up dust. As it got closer, Elena recognized the rider. Her father. Her stomach twisted. Gideon stepped in front of her instinctively, but she moved to stand beside him. Equal. Her father reined in his horse and dismounted. He looked older than she remembered, thinner. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and his clothes, while still fine, looked worn. "Elena," he said. "Father." He glanced at Gideon, then back to her. "I need to speak with you." "Then speak." "Alone." "No." Her voice was steady. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of my husband." Her father's jaw tightened. "Very well." He took a breath. "I came to ask for your help. Our situation has become dire. The bank is threatening to foreclose. We have nowhere else to turn." "You have friends," Elena said. "Business associates. Surely one of them—" "They've all turned their backs on us. Word got out about the irregularities. No one will touch us now." "That's unfortunate." He stared at her. "That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to help us. We're your family, Elena. Your mother, your sisters. My family is right here." She gestured to Gideon, to the ranch behind them. "These are the people who stood by me, who chose me. You're just the people I used to live with." Her father's face went red. "How dare you?" "No." Elena stepped forward. "How dare you? You came here after months of silence, after years of treating me like I was worthless, and you think I owe you something? You think because we share blood, I should forget everything you did? We raised you. You tolerated me. There's a difference." Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. "I heard you, Father, that night after the proposal came. I heard you celebrating because you were finally rid of me. I heard Mother say she thought you'd be stuck with me forever. I heard Corinne and Marissa laugh about it." Her father went pale. "You want my help?" Elena continued. "You want me to ask my husband to save you from the consequences of your own corruption? I won't do it. Not for you. Not for any of you. Elena, please. The answer is no." He looked at Gideon, desperate. "Mr. Vale, surely you can reason with her." "My wife's already given you her answer," Gideon said quietly. "I suggest you respect it." Her father's hands curled into fists. "You've turned her against us." "I didn't have to. You did that yourselves." For a moment, Elena thought her father might argue, might yell or threaten, or try to guilt her into changing her mind. But instead, he just looked at her with something like disbelief. "You've become hard," he said. "No," Elena replied. "I've become honest. You just never liked that about me." He stood there for another moment, then climbed back on his horse. "You'll regret this." "I really won't." He rode off without another word, and Elena watched him go. She waited for the guilt to hit, for the doubt, for the voice in her head that said she should have helped anyway, but it never came. Gideon put his hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah." She turned to him. "I really am." He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself lean into him. Let herself be held. Let herself feel the relief of finally being done with people who'd never deserved her in the first place. "I'm proud of you," Gideon said. "For what?" "For standing up for yourself, for not letting him make you feel small." "I learned from the best." She pulled back to look at him. "You've never tried to make me small. You've only ever made me feel like I could be more. You were always more. I just saw it." She kissed him, there in the yard with the men watching and the mountains standing witness. Kissed him like he was the best thing that ever happened to her, because he was. That night, lying in bed, Elena thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the cold house where she'd never fit, to this wild, beautiful place where she finally did. From the girl who'd believed she was the problem, to the woman who knew better. She thought about her father's face when she'd said no, about the power in that word, about how good it felt to choose herself. "Thank you," she said quietly. Gideon, half asleep, mumbled, "For what?" "For giving me the choice. Back at the beginning. For making it clear I didn't have to come if I didn't want to." He was awake now, looking at her in the darkness. "I meant it. You deserved that much. Most men wouldn't have done that. Most men are idiots." She laughed and curled into him. "I'm glad I came. I'm glad I chose this." "Me too." He kissed her forehead. "Best choice either of us ever made." Elena closed her eyes, the ring on her finger catching the moonlight. She thought about the life they'd built, the one they were still building, thought about the work ahead, the seasons to come, the years stretching out before them. And she smiled, because for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch exploded with life. The grass grew tall and green, the cattle fattened on good grazing, and the work shifted from survival to growth. Elena had never seen anything like it, the way the land could go from frozen and harsh to lush and generous in a matter of weeks. She and Gideon worked from sunup to sundown, preparing for the cattle drive that would take them to market. It was the biggest event of the year, the thing everything else built toward. Samuel and the men talked about it constantly, planning routes and supplies, arguing good-naturedly about which trails were best. "You should come," Gideon said one evening as they sat on the porch. Elena looked at him. "On the drive? Why not? You handle cattle as well as any of us, better than Rio, and he's been doing this for years." "How long does it take?" 3 weeks, give or take. Depends on the weather and how cooperative the herd is. 3 weeks on the trail, sleeping under the stars, eating out of a camp pot. It sounded exhausting. It sounded perfect. "I'm in," she said. Gideon smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." They left in early June, driving 200 head of cattle toward the markets in the eastern settlements. Elena rode alongside the men, eating their dust, learning their songs, laughing at their terrible jokes. She learned to rope a stray, to spot trouble before it started, to sleep through the sound of lowing cattle, and wake instantly when something changed. She learned she was tougher than she'd ever imagined. On the 5th night, sitting around the campfire, Rio asked her how she'd ended up with Gideon. "He asked," she said simply. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Samuel chuckled. "There's more to it than that, and we all know it." Elena looked at Gideon across the fire. He was watching her, something soft in his expression. "He saw something in me that my own family didn't, thought I was worth the trouble." "And are you?" one of the younger hands asked. "Worth the trouble?" "Absolutely," Gideon said before Elena could answer. "More than worth it." The men hooted and whistled, and Elena felt her face flush. But she didn't look away from Gideon, just held his gaze and let herself feel the warmth of it. The drive went smoothly until the 2nd week, when a summer storm rolled in fast and mean. The sky turned black, lightning cracked across the horizon, and the cattle started getting restless. "Everyone stay close," Gideon shouted over the rising wind. "Don't let them scatter." The rain hit like a wall, cold and hard. Elena could barely see through it, but she kept her horse steady, kept her position on the flank of the herd. Thunder boomed, and the cattle surged, panicking. "They're going to run!" Samuel yelled. And they did. 200 head of cattle stampeding through the mud, and all Elena could do was ride alongside them, trying to turn the leaders, trying to keep them from running straight off a cliff or into a canyon. Her horse slipped once, nearly went down, and her heart stopped. But the mare caught herself and kept going. It felt like hours. It was probably 20 minutes. By the time they got the herd under control, Elena was soaked through, shaking from adrenaline, and laughing like she'd lost her mind. Gideon rode up beside her, equally drenched. "You all right?" "That was incredible." He stared at her. "You're insane." "Probably." She grinned at him. "But I'm alive." He shook his head, but he was smiling. You fit right in with this bunch of lunatics. That night, huddled under a tarp while the rain pounded above them, Elena and Gideon lay tangled together, sharing body heat. I meant what I said earlier, he told her quietly. You're worth every bit of trouble. More. Even when I'm being reckless? Especially then. He kissed her temple. You remind me what it's like to be brave. You're the bravest person I know. No, I just do what needs doing. You choose to be brave. You choose to stand up even when it costs you. That's different. Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she just pressed closer to him and let the sound of the rain drown out everything else. They reached the markets 2 weeks later, trail-worn and exhausted. The prices were good, better than Gideon had hoped. He sold the entire herd in one day, and that night the men celebrated in the saloon while Elena and Gideon walked the quiet streets of the settlement. We did well, he said. Really well. This'll carry us through the winter and then some. We? We, he confirmed. It's your ranch too now, Elena. Your work, your sweat. You've earned your share. She thought about that. About how far she'd come from the girl who had nothing, who was nothing, to this, a partner in something real, something she'd helped build. I want to expand the herd next year, she said, and I think we should hire another hand, someone young who wants to learn. Give them the chance Samuel gave you. Gideon looked at her with something like awe. You've been thinking about this? Of course I have. It's my ranch too, remember? He laughed and pulled her close. I love you. I know. She smiled up at him. I love you too. They started back toward the ranch the next morning, lighter without the herd, making better time. Elena was eager to get home, to see the valley again, to sleep in her own bed. But when they crested the final ridge and looked down, something was wrong. Smoke. Not from the chimney, from the barn. Gideon kicked his horse into a gallop, and Elena followed. They thundered down the trail, hearts pounding, and pulled up in the yard to find chaos. The barn was on fire, flames shooting through the roof. The men were running with buckets, trying to save what they could, but it was clear the building was lost. Gideon was off his horse in an instant. The animals! We got them out, Rio shouted, soot-streaked and coughing. All of them! What happened? Don't know. We were in the bunkhouse, heard one of the horses scream, and by the time we got here it was already burning. Elena dismounted and grabbed a bucket. For the next 2 hours they fought the fire, throwing water on the flames until their arms ached and their lungs burned. By the time they got it under control, the barn was a blackened skeleton, still smoldering. Gideon stood staring at the ruin, face tight. Elena put a hand on his arm. The animals are safe, she said. That's what matters. The barn can be rebuilt. It'll take months, cost more than we made on the drive. Then we'll do it in stages, a little at a time. She turned him to face her. Gideon, we'll figure it out. Together. He pulled her into a fierce hug. I don't know what I'd do without you. Good thing you'll never have to find out. They camped outside that night, too exhausted to do anything else. The men sprawled around the fire, passing a bottle of whiskey someone had saved from the flames. Could have been worse, Samuel said finally. Could have lost the house, could have lost people. Could have lost the horses, Rio added. That would have been real bad. We'll rebuild, Gideon said. Bigger, better. Won't make the same mistakes with the wiring. Elena looked up. You think it was the wiring? What else? She thought about it. About how convenient the timing was. Them gone, the barn catching fire, no one around to see how it started. About Carter Webb and his threats. About her father's desperation. Maybe nothing, she said, but I want to take a look in the daylight. The next morning, she and Gideon picked through the wreckage. Most of it was too destroyed to tell them anything. But in the back corner, Elena found something that made her stomach drop. A lantern, shattered but clearly visible, and a smell that didn't match the wood smoke. Gideon, she called. He came over, looked at what she was holding. His face went hard. Kerosene, he said. Someone did this on purpose. Webb. Maybe. Or... She didn't want to say it, but she had to. Or my father. Gideon's jaw tightened. If it was your father, then he's more desperate than I thought. She set the lantern down carefully. Either way, we need to find out for sure. They rode into town that afternoon. The sheriff was a practical man named Dawson who'd known Gideon's father. He listened to their story, examined the evidence they'd brought, and nodded grimly. "I'll look into it," he said. "But I'll be honest, proving arson's hard, especially if whoever did it was careful." "Do your best," Gideon said. "That's all I'm asking." 2 days later, Dawson came to the ranch. He had news, and none of it was good. "Found a witness?" he said. "A drifter passing through saw a man near your barn the night of the fire. Described him as older, well-dressed, riding a gray horse." Elena's father rode a gray horse. "Can you arrest him?" she asked. "On the word of a drifter with no fixed address? No judge in the county would issue that warrant." Dawson looked apologetic. "I can question him, put some pressure on. But unless he confesses or we find harder evidence—" "He won't confess," Elena said. "He's too proud." "Then my hands are tied." After Dawson left, Elena sat on the porch steps, head in her hands. Gideon sat down next to her. "We could go after him ourselves," he said quietly. "And do what?" "I don't know. Make him pay somehow." Elena thought about it, about confronting her father, about forcing him to admit what he'd done, about the satisfaction it might bring. But then she thought about the ranch, about the work ahead, about the life they were building and how letting her father poison it would be letting him win. "No," she said finally. "He's not worth it." "Elena, I mean it." She looked at him. "He burned down a barn. It's replaceable. But if we go after him, if we let this turn into some kind of feud, it'll never end. He'll keep coming at us and we'll keep fighting back, and eventually it'll destroy everything we've built. So we just let him get away with it? No, we rebuild. We make this place better than it was. And we live well." She took his hand. "That's the best revenge, not giving him the power to ruin us." Gideon was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. "You're right. You're always right. Not always. But this time, yeah." They started rebuilding the next day. It was slow, back-breaking work. They salvaged what they could from the old barn, ordered new lumber, hired extra hands to help with the construction. Elena worked alongside everyone else, hauling boards, hammering nails, ignoring the blisters on her palms. One afternoon, about 2 weeks into the project, another rider came up the road. Elena tensed, expecting her father again. But it was Corinne. Her oldest sister sat on her horse, looking uncertain and out of place. She was thinner than Elena remembered, and her dress, while still fine, had seen better days. Elena set down her hammer and walked over. "Corinne?" "Elena." Her sister dismounted awkwardly. I wasn't sure you'd see me." "I'm seeing you. What do you want?" Corinne flinched. "I came to apologize." Elena crossed her arms. "For what, specifically?" "For everything. For the way we treated you. For laughing when you left. For not standing up for you when I should have." "That's a long list." "I know." Corinne looked down at her hands. "I know it doesn't fix anything. But I needed to say it anyway." Elena studied her sister. She looked genuinely miserable, genuinely sorry. But sorry didn't rebuild a barn. Sorry didn't erase years of cruelty. "Why now?" Elena asked. "Because I finally understand what you went through. After the engagement fell apart, after everyone turned on us. I know what it's like now, to be the one people whisper about, the one nobody wants." "And you thought we had something in common? Don't we?" Elena laughed, bitter. "No, Corinne, we don't. You're experiencing consequences for the first time in your life. I lived with them every day." I know it's not the same." Corinne's voice broke. "But I'm trying, Elena. I'm trying to be better." "Why? Because it's convenient now? Because you need something?" "Because I was wrong." Corinne looked up, tears on her face. "I was wrong about you. You were never the problem. I was just too scared to admit it." Elena wanted to stay angry, wanted to send her sister away and never think about her again. But standing there, looking at Corinne's tear-stained face, she saw something she recognized. Fear. Shame. The desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be forgiven. "I'm not going to help Father," Elena said. "If that's why you're here, it's not. He doesn't even know I came." Corinne wiped her eyes. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that you were right about everything. Elena took a breath. Okay. Okay? I accept your apology, but that doesn't mean I trust you. Trust takes time. I understand. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Corinne turned back to her horse. Corinne, Elena called. Her sister stopped. If you mean it, about wanting to be better, prove it. Don't just apologize to me. Stand up the next time someone tries to tear someone else down. Be the person you should have been. Corinne nodded. I will, I promise. She rode away, and Elena stood watching until she disappeared. Gideon came up beside her. You all right? He asked. Yeah. She turned to him. I think I am. You could have told her off, could have made her feel as bad as she made you feel. I know, but what would that accomplish? She's already miserable. Kicking her while she's down wouldn't make me feel better. You're a better person than I am. Elena smiled. We both know that's not true. The barn took 6 weeks to rebuild. When it was finished, it was bigger than the old one, with better ventilation and stronger supports. They threw a party to celebrate, invited everyone who'd helped, and Elena made enough food to feed an army. Standing in the new barn, watching people laugh and dance and drink, Elena felt a surge of pride so strong it almost hurt. This was hers, theirs, something real, built from nothing but work and will. Gideon found her later, pulled her into a quiet corner. Happy? He asked. Ridiculously. Good. He kissed her softly. You deserve to be happy. So do you. I am. He rested his forehead against hers. I really, really am. Summer faded into fall, and Elena realized she'd been at the ranch for over a year. A full cycle of seasons. She'd survived winter, helped with spring calving, made the cattle drive, rebuilt the barn. She'd become part of the land in a way she never thought possible. One evening in late September, she realized she was late. Not for dinner. For something else. She didn't say anything at first, didn't want to get Gideon's hopes up if she was wrong, but when 2 weeks passed and she was still late, she rode into town and saw the doctor. He confirmed what she already knew. She rode back to the ranch in a daze, mind spinning. A baby. She was going to have a baby. She and Gideon were going to be parents. The thought terrified her. What did she know about being a mother? Her own mother had been cold, distant, more concerned with appearances than with actual love. What if she turned out the same way? What if she failed this child the way her parents had failed her? But then she thought about Gideon, about the way he'd chosen her, trusted her, believed in her, about the life they'd built together based on honesty and respect and partnership. This child would grow up loved, would grow up knowing their voice mattered, would never, ever feel like a burden. That evening, after dinner, Elena took Gideon's hand and led him outside. They walked to their favorite spot, the place where he'd proposed, and sat down on the grass. I have something to tell you, she said. He looked concerned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She took a breath. I'm pregnant. Gideon went very still. You're pregnant. I saw the doctor today. He thinks I'm about 2 months along. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. We're having a baby, he said, wonder in his voice. We're having a baby. He pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. I can't believe it. Neither can I. Are you happy? He asked. Terrified. But yes. Happy. Me too. He pulled back to look at her. We're going to be good at this. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because we're good at everything else, and because we actually care. That puts us ahead of most people. Elena laughed, relieved. I love you. I love you too, both of you. He put his hand on her stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet. All of us. The pregnancy was harder than Elena expected. She was sick most mornings, exhausted all the time, and her emotions were all over the place. But she kept working, kept pulling her weight, because sitting still felt worse than being tired. Gideon worried, tried to get her to rest more, to take it easy. But Elena was stubborn. I'm pregnant, not broken, she told him for the 100th time. I know, but you're carrying our child. I'm allowed to worry. Worry less. Trust me more. He tried, but she'd catch him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, his face tight with concern. Winter came again, and Elena grew. By Christmas, she couldn't see her feet anymore. By February, she was waddling more than walking, and by March, she was ready to be done. "I'm enormous," she complained one evening. "You're beautiful," Gideon said. "I'm a whale." "A beautiful whale." She threw a pillow at him. The baby came on a cold April morning, 3 weeks early and in a hurry. Elena's water broke while she was feeding the chickens, and by the time Gideon got her to the house, the contractions were already strong. They sent for the midwife, but the baby didn't wait. Elena labored for 6 hours, gripping Gideon's hand so hard she thought she might break it. And then their daughter arrived, small and red-faced and screaming at the top of her lungs. "She's perfect," the midwife said, wrapping the baby in a blanket. "A little small, but strong. Good lungs on her." Elena held her daughter for the first time and felt her entire world shift. This tiny, perfect person who hadn't existed before, who was part her, part Gideon, and entirely her own. "Hi," Elena whispered. "I'm your mother." The baby blinked up at her with dark eyes, already alert and curious. Gideon sat on the edge of the bed, staring at them both with tears on his face. "She's beautiful. She looks like you." "She looks like you." "She looks like herself." Elena touched the baby's tiny hand, and the infant's fingers wrapped around hers. "What should we name her?" They'd talked about names for months, but never settled on one. Now, looking at their daughter, Elena knew exactly what felt right. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope." Gideon smiled. "Hope Vale. I like it. Hope for everything we want her life to be. Hope for the future we're giving her." "Hope," Gideon repeated, and kissed Elena's forehead. "Perfect." The first few months were chaos. Hope was a demanding baby, awake at all hours, crying when she was hungry or wet or just because. Elena was exhausted beyond anything she'd ever experienced. But every time she looked at her daughter, she felt something fierce and protective and overwhelming. This was love. Real, unconditional, terrifying love. Gideon was a natural father. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Hope when she wouldn't sleep, sang to her in his off-key voice until she calmed down. Watching him with their daughter made Elena fall in love with him all over again. One night, when Hope was about 3 months old, Elena woke to find Gideon's side of the bed empty. She got up and found him in the main room, sitting by the fire with Hope in his arms. "Can't sleep?" Elena asked. She was fussing, didn't want to wake you. Elena sat down next to him. "You're a good father." "I'm trying." "You're succeeding." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this. A family that actually felt like family." "Neither did I." They sat in silence, watching the fire, and Elena felt something settle deep in her chest. Peace. Real, lasting peace. Hope grew quickly. By 6 months, she was sitting up. By 8 months, she was crawling. By her first birthday, she was walking and getting into everything. She had Gideon's dark hair and Elena's stubbornness, and she was absolutely fearless. "She's going to give us gray hair," Gideon said one afternoon after Hope tried to climb onto a horse by herself. "Probably," Elena agreed. "But she's ours." "Yeah, she is." That summer, Elena's father came back. Not in person, he sent another letter. This one was different from the others. Shorter. Sadder. "Elena, I am writing to inform you that your mother has passed. Pneumonia. It was quick, I thought you should know. Your father Elena read it twice, waiting for grief to hit. But it didn't, just a distant sadness for the woman her mother could have been, if she'd chosen differently. She showed the letter to Gideon. "Do you want to go to the funeral?" he asked. "No." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. She stopped being my mother a long time ago. I don't need to pretend otherwise now." "All right." He put his arms around her. "Whatever you need." What she needed was to keep moving forward, to focus on the family she'd chosen, not the one she'd been born into. A month later, another letter came, this one from Marissa. "Elena, Father is selling the house, moving to the city. Corinne and I are making our own way now. I thought you should know that she's been helping at the church, working with children. She's different than she used to be. Better. I'm trying to be better too. I know we were terrible to you. I know apologies don't fix that. But I wanted you to know we're trying. If you ever want to write back, I'd like to hear from you. Your sister, Marissa." Elena folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday she'd write back. Maybe someday she'd be ready to let her sisters back into her life, if only at the edges. But not yet. Right now, her life was full of work and love, and a daughter who was learning to say mama and dada with equal enthusiasm, full of mornings on the porch with Gideon and evenings by the fire, full of purpose and partnership and the kind of happiness that came from building something real. 2 years after Hope was born, Elena found out she was pregnant again. This time it was easier. She knew what to expect, knew her body would bounce back, knew Gideon would worry, and she'd tell him to stop and they'd figure it out together. Their son was born in November, during the first snow. He came fast, almost too fast, and arrived before the midwife did. Elena delivered him with only Gideon there, and when she held him for the first time, she felt the same overwhelming rush of love. "What should we name him?" Gideon asked. Elena looked at her son, dark eyes, already calm and watchful. "Samuel, after the man who taught us both what family really means." Gideon's eyes filled. He'd like that. Old Samuel cried when they told him. Actually cried, which Elena had never seen him do. He held the baby like he was made of glass and promised to teach him everything he knew. Hope adored her baby brother. She brought him toys, sang to him in her off-key toddler voice, and got upset when he cried. "Baby's sad," she'd say seriously, trying to comfort him. Elena watched her children play and felt something she'd never expected to feel, complete, like every piece of her life had finally fallen into the right place. One evening, when the kids were asleep and she and Gideon sat on the porch like they had 100 times before, she said what she'd been thinking for weeks. "I'm happy, really, truly happy, and I don't think I ever believed I could be." Gideon took her hand. "You deserve it." "So do you." "I know." He smiled. "And I am. Happy, I mean. This life we've built. It's everything I wanted and things I didn't even know I could have." Elena thought about the journey that brought her here, about the house she'd fled and the family who'd rejected her, about the proposal that seemed like exile and turned into salvation, about all the small choices that led to this moment, sitting on a porch in the mountains with a man who loved her and children who would never doubt they were wanted. "I think about them sometimes," she said, "my family, my father especially, and I wonder if he ever thinks about what he lost when he pushed me away. Does it matter?" "Not really, but I hope he does. I hope he realizes that the daughter he thought was worthless built something beautiful, that the girl he called a burden became someone strong." "You were always strong. He just couldn't see it." "No, he couldn't." She squeezed Gideon's hand. "But you could. Best decision I ever made. Choosing you. You gave me a choice too. That's what made it real." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. In the house, one of the children made a small sound, then settled. The valley stretched out below them, dark and peaceful. Elena thought about the people who'd tried to break her and failed, thought about the ones who'd dismissed her and lived to regret it, thought about how the very thing meant to destroy her, being sent away, being unwanted, had become the thing that saved her. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't striking back. It was building a life so good that the people who hurt you became irrelevant. It was finding your own worth when everyone else told you that you had none. It was choosing yourself, even when no one else chose you first. She'd learned that the hard way, but she'd learned it, and now she'd make sure her children never had to. "What are you thinking?" Gideon asked. Elena smiled. "That we won. We actually won." "Yeah." He pulled her close. "We really did." Years passed. Hope grew into a confident, opinionated child who questioned everything and feared nothing. Samuel was quieter, more thoughtful, but just as stubborn. They learned to ride, to work, to pull their weight on the ranch. Elena taught them to be honest, to stand up for themselves, to never let anyone make them feel small. Gideon taught them the value of hard work, the importance of keeping your word, and how to read the land like a language. Together, they built a family that was nothing like the one Elena had come from. A family based on respect and truth, and the understanding that love wasn't something you had to earn. It was something freely given. The ranch prospered. They expanded the herd, hired more hands, built a second barn. Elena's instincts for business turned out to be sharp, and she took over managing the accounts completely. Gideon ran the day-to-day operations, and they made decisions together, true partners in every sense. Old Samuel eventually retired, though he refused to leave the ranch. They built him a small cabin near the main house, and he spent his days teaching the children and offering advice no one asked for, but everyone needed. Rio got married to a woman from town and brought her to live in the bunkhouse they converted into a small house. The ranch became a community, a place where people who didn't fit anywhere else found a home. Elena never saw her father again. She heard years later that he'd died in the city, alone and broke. She felt nothing when she got the news. No satisfaction, no sadness, just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter was finally closed. Corinne wrote occasionally. Careful letters that spoke of her work, her attempts to be better, her hope that maybe someday they could be sisters in truth, not just in blood. Elena wrote back sometimes, brief and polite. She wasn't ready to fully forgive, but she was willing to leave the door open. Marissa never wrote again. Elena wondered sometimes what happened to her, but never cared enough to find out. On Hope's 10th birthday, Elena and Gideon took the children up to the high pasture where he'd proposed. They sat under the old pine tree, and Elena told them the story of how she and Gideon met. So you didn't love each other at first? Hope asked, skeptical. No, Elena said, but we respected each other. And respect turned into trust, and trust turned into love. That's boring, Hope declared. I want love at first sight. Gideon laughed. You want what you want. But I'll tell you this, respect lasts longer than butterflies in your stomach. Samuel, wise beyond his years, nodded seriously. I think I understand. You will, Elena promised, someday. They sat together as the sun set, and Elena felt the weight of everything she'd built. Not just the ranch or the family, but herself. The woman she'd become through choosing, over and over, to be honest. To be strong. To refuse to be diminished. Mama? Hope asked. Do you ever wish things had been different with your first family? Elena thought about it. No, because if things had been different, I wouldn't have this. I wouldn't have your father, or this ranch, or you and your brother. Everything I went through led me here, and here is exactly where I want to be. Good, Hope said, and leaned against her. Because we want you here too. Elena wrapped her arms around her daughter and looked at Gideon over her head. He smiled, the same soft smile he'd given her 1,000 times before. The one that said, I see you. I know you. I love you. And she smiled back. That night, after the children were asleep, Elena and Gideon lay in bed talking about the future, about expanding the ranch, about teaching the kids everything they knew, about growing old together in this place they'd built. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked. Choosing me instead of someone easier? Never, not once. Gideon turned to face her. You made me better, challenged me, pushed me to be more than I would have been on my own. Why would I regret that? Because I came with baggage, a family that tried to burn down your barn, a past that was complicated. And I came with a failing ranch and no idea how to open up to another person. We were both messy, Elena. We still are. But we're messy together, and that makes all the difference. She kissed him, slow and deep. I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. I know. He pulled her close. And I love you. Every stubborn, honest, fierce part of you. They fell asleep tangled together, the way they had for years. And outside, the valley slept under the stars, peaceful and whole. Elena had been many things in her life. The unwanted daughter, the burden, the problem, the cast-off. But here, in this place, with these people, she was simply herself. Wife, mother, partner, friend. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Because the truth she'd learned, the one that had taken her years to understand, was this. You don't need everyone to see your worth. You just need to see it yourself. And then you need to find the people who see it too. The ones who'd tried to break her were long gone, living with the consequences of their own cruelty. And she was here, surrounded by love she'd earned through honesty and work, and the courage to keep choosing herself even when it was hard. That was the real victory, not proving them wrong, but proving herself right. She was worthy of love, of respect, of a life built on truth. And she'd found it in the last place anyone expected, in the mountains, in the mud, in the arms of a man who saw her and didn't flinch. The story could have ended in exile, in bitterness, in a woman broken by rejection. But it didn't. It ended here, In a home filled with laughter, in a family built on choice, in a love that demanded honesty and gave back everything. And Elena Vale, who'd spent so much of her life being told she was too much, finally understood the truth. She was exactly enough.
What the heck? Hello, Kamei.
The vessel is
Hello, friend. How was your stream? Let me give you a shout out. What did you get up to tonight? The Lost Souls are coming. Live long and prosper. Hope you're doing well. Oh, I definitely did not get all of that. There we go. Hello, Brianna. Welcome back in. Were you crocheting tonight? I can't remember. I was lurking, but could not really pay attention and lurk. But yeah. I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. Yesterday I took the day off of work. Was not feeling so great allergy wise. Thankful I could take the day off. Super thankful. But yeah, I ended up needing to take the day off. And definitely much better for it today. Killed it with work. I got good like 3 chunks of work completed in a row, which is awesome. But yeah, and then I we've been having a really good stream, hanging out with friends and stuff. Temporarily back, but I have to go mod. So Mads, have a great night. All right, sounds good. Brianna, hope you have a great night.